Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Today we are essentially launching a rescue mission for the word courage.
I like that phrasing, a rescue mission.
Right. Because we're looking at a really fascinating framework today. It's found within biblical texts. And it basically argues that waiting for your fear to disappear is, well, it's actually a trap.
Yeah, a massive trap.
So we are exploring the anatomy of bravery, specifically how the Bible constructs it, not as this, rare mystical personality trait that you're just born with, but as a highly structured operational system.
Which is something that completely flips the standard cultural script. I mean, we are so conditioned to think of the hero standing at the edge of the battlefield, their heart rate is perfectly steady, and they're just feeling this absolute calm.
Like an action movie.
Exactly, like an action movie. But the framework we're examining today, it's totally dismantles that idea. We're going to look at these historical and cultural texts to see how they diagnose fear and actually engineer bravery.
And just to set our parameters clearly right out of the gate for you listening, our goal here is to impartially analyze these ideas.
Right.
We aren't taking sides. We definitely aren't preaching, and we aren't endorsing specific religious viewpoints. We're really just treating this as an intensive study of a psychological and spiritual framework.
A topic of study.
Exactly. And the hook that really grabs you right away from the source material is this striking foundational definition. It says, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to stand when fear is present.
That is so good.
It promises prisons in the battle, not a life without battles.
And that simple definition is, it's a massive paradigm shift. It immediately exposes a flaw in how most of us operate day to day.
Oh, for sure.
Because if you're waiting to just not be afraid before you take action, well, you are going to be waiting forever. The text establishes that the fear is a given, the battle is a given.
Right.
The only variable in the whole equation is whether or not you decide to hold your ground.
So, okay, let's unpack this a bit. If we completely separate courage from the feeling of fearlessness, how do we actually define it then?
Well, the texts point to a very specific passage to redefine our experience of this concept. It's Joshua 1:9.
Okay.
And the crucial phrasing there is, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous.
Have I not commanded you?
Yeah, the vocabulary there is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Have I not commanded you? It removes courage entirely from the realm of the emotional, and it places it squarely in the realm of volition, of choice.
I want to push on that idea of it being a command, actually, because at first glance, it almost sounds a bit insensitive.
How so?
Like telling someone who is having a panic attack to just calm down.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It doesn't work. But there's a deeper psychological mechanism at play here when you really look at it.
Yeah.
When I read that, it makes me think of like military training or muscle memory for first responders.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Think about a firefighter standing outside a burning building. They're biologically terrified,
Yes.
right? Their brain is screaming at them to run away.
Of course.
But the command, the directive they've been given, it supersedes the emotion. You don't have to feel like running into the burning building. You just literally have to do it. The action overrides the limbic system entirely.
I would actually take that analogy even further.
Okay.
The genius of framing it as a command is that it bypasses the emotional center of the brain completely. Because think about it, you cannot command an emotion.
Right. You can't just mandate feelings.
Exactly. You can't order someone to suddenly feel joyful or feel peaceful or, in this case, feel brave. Emotions are involuntary. They're biological responses to stimuli. But you can command an action. God didn't say to Joshua, feel courageous. He said, be courageous.
Be. Yeah, be is a state of action. It's a verb.
Exactly. And treating it as an action rather than an emotion does something really fascinating to human psychology.
Yeah.
If courage is a commanded action, there's a profound secondary implication there. It means you already possess the capacity to execute it.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is a huge shift in perspective.
Right. You aren't being asked to magically conjure a feeling out of thin air while you're terrified.
You aren't desperately hoping bravery suddenly washes over you like some magic spell.
Yes. The capacity to stand is already preloaded into your system. The command is simply the authorized trigger to deploy it. In this framework, courage is a decision you make long before it ever becomes a feeling.
But, and I have to say this, that creates a pretty significant friction point for most people.
Sure does.
Because it's one thing to philosophically agree that, yeah, courage is a commanded decision. It is an entirely different reality to actually make that decision when the odds are objectively overwhelmingly stacked against you.
Yeah, the real-world application is tough.
But the biblical framework doesn't shy away from that friction at all. It actually offers what is arguably the most famous case study in literature for this exact scenario.
The story of David and Goliath.
Yes, 1 Samuel 17.
It's the ultimate asymmetric matchup. And what's interesting is the text goes out of its way to emphasize the sheer absurdity of the fight by contrasting their assets.
Right, Goliath's assets are hyper-tangible.
Very tangible. He possesses massive physical size, he's covered in heavy armor, he has a lifetime of combat experience, and his weapons are incredibly lethal. He is basically a walking, breathing mathematical certainty of victory.
And then you have David, who is, what, a young shepherd bringing lunch to his brothers?
Exactly, yeah.
And according to the text, his primary asset isn't a weapon. It certainly isn't combat experience. It's, quote, a revelation of God. David looks at the exact same giant everyone else is terrified of, and he tells Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord."
The contrast there is stark. I mean, the entire Israelite army sees a monster. David sees a target.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
Because to a modern analytical mind, David's response sounds incredibly naive, or even genuinely delusional.
Yeah.
To look at a literal, heavily armed giant who has been screaming death threats for 40 days, and to just competently bypass all those very lethal facts because you have a revelation, it sounds a bit like toxic positivity.
Just think good thoughts and the giant goes away.
Exactly. A revelation doesn't stop a spear.
And it would absolutely be delusional if David were actually denying reality. But if you look closely at the text, David doesn't ignore the spear. He explicitly acknowledges the sword and the spear right to Goliath's face.
Well, that's true. He names the weapons.
Yes. He is fully aware of the physics of the situation. What David is doing, according to this framework, isn't ignoring reality at all. He is reframing the metric of the fight.
Reframing the metric. What do you mean by the metric of the fight?
Think about how we generally assess risk. We use metrics. If you are in a physical battle, the standard metric is size, strength, and weaponry. If you evaluate this matchup using that standard metric, David loses 100 times out of 100, and the Israeli army is paralyzed because they are using that standard metric. But David introduces a completely alien calculus to the battlefield. He changes the scale of measurement entirely.
So he essentially refuses to play the game by Goliath's rules.
Precisely. The text argues that you don't fight this kind of battle with size, you fight it with revelation. David recalibrates the odds based not on what is standing in front of him, but on who is standing behind him.
Oh, I see.
The principle embedded here is that courage expands when you shift your focus to who is with you, rather than obsessing over what is against you.
It's an asymmetry of combat. The giant is big, obviously, but the name of the Lord in David's framework is bigger. It's an assertion of a higher reality that just trumps the immediate physical threat.
And that recalibration changes everything about how you experience fear. The giant doesn't shrink.
He's still 9 feet tall.
Exactly, yeah. But your perception of your own backing grows so large that the giant effectively becomes irrelevant.
Which makes sense on paper. I mean, logically, I get it. But recalibrating those odds in your head in the middle of a high-stakes, terrifying situation.
It's incredibly difficult.
It's so difficult for us to do. And it's difficult because of how fear actually operates in the human body. Fear isn't just a quiet suggestion. It's a physiological takeover.
Very much so.
And the biblical text addresses this head-on, which I found fascinating. It doesn't treat fear just as a rush of adrenaline or a survival instinct. It categorizes it in a completely different way.
Yeah, we see this clearly in another passage, 2 Timothy 7:2, which states that God has not given a spirit of fear, but rather a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind.
Here's where it gets really interesting because calling it a spirit of fear changes the entire dynamic.
It does.
It frames fear as an external force that is actively trying to impose itself on you, rather than just, an internal character flaw or a biological glitch. It's almost parasitic. And the texts illustrate that this fear does 3 specific things to us. It paralyzes our decision-making, it fundamentally distorts our thinking, and it silences our faith.
And notice that the antidote the text provides isn't simply to clench your jaw and try harder.
Right.
The antidote is deeply cognitive. It points back to Romans 8:31, which asks this grounding question. If God is for us, who can be against us?
The phrase in 2 Timothy that I actually find most fascinating is a sound mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you think about anyone who has ever experienced true panic or a severe anxiety attack, you know exactly how fear physically and mentally warps your reality.
It really does.
Your prefrontal cortex basically just shuts down. Your logic evaporates entirely. A minor setback suddenly feels like a catastrophic, life-ending event. You literally cannot think straight.
You're in pure survival mode.
Exactly. And the text opposes that paralyzing, chaotic fear, not just with spiritual power, but with logic, with groundedness, a sound mind.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the true brilliance of this framework. It opposes chaos with clarity. It roots your courage not in your adrenaline levels, but deeply in your identity.
Identity.
If fear is an external force that specializes in distorting reality, you don't fight it by arguing with the distortion. You confront it with the cold, hard facts of your identity.
So you don't try to negotiate with the panic.
Never negotiate with the panic. When your identity is rock solid, when, based on this biblical framework that you are not alone, that you are backed by the ultimate authority, and that you have a purpose beyond just surviving the next 10 minutes, the opposition shrinks.
Right.
David wasn't just a random kid who wandered onto a battlefield. He operated as a fully authorized representative of a higher power. That identity gives his sound mind the anchor it desperately needs to not be swept away by the terror of a giant.
Okay, so we have the mindset. We understand the recalibrated metric. We have the identity anchored by a sound mind. But the text is ruthless in insisting that all of this internal belief, this entire mental framework, is completely useless without external movement.
Yes.
Courage, according to this study, has a deeply kinetic nature.
It requires motion. Potential energy has to become kinetic energy.
Right. Because if we look back at the David and Goliath narrative, the text highlights a detail that is incredibly kinetic. David didn't just stand safely at the edge of the camp and shout his revelation from far away.
No, he didn't.
He didn't just quietly believe in his heart that he had the backing of God. He ran toward Goliath. He physically moved into the danger zone. Courage isn't passive. It moves, it speaks, and it steps forward when literally every other person is stepping backward.
Exactly.
Faith or internal belief without kinetic action will never actually defeat the giant in front of you.
And this is where the framework transitions from abstract theology into gritty, real-time application. Because the question is, how do you actually generate that forward motion when your knees are shaking?
Exactly. So what does this all mean for the person listening to this right now? How do you operationalize this?
Well, the texts provide a clear, practical methodology for fighting against insurmountable odds.
And it starts with feeding the courage daily, right?
Right. You strengthen your spirit with truth before the crisis even hits. And then, crucially, you speak the victory before you see the result. You don't wait for the giant to fall before you declare that you are going to win.
I'd argue that is one of the most difficult yet vital mechanics in the whole system. Declaring the outcome in the middle of the chaos. It actively shifts the atmosphere of the fight. It reinforces that sound mind we talked about earlier.
And it creates momentum. You don't have to solve the entire problem in one sweeping gesture. You just have to take one bold step at a time. The text implies that most victories aren't won by the strongest or the smartest. They are won by the person who simply refuses to quit. Yeah.
But there is one specific directive in this methodology that seems to act as the linchpin for everything else, and it's about controlling your focus.
Controlling your focus. Yes, the psychological rule of thumb embedded here is devastatingly simple, but incredibly potent. What you look at grows.
What you look at grows.
It's so true. That sounds like target fixation in driving.
Oh, explain that.
Well, if you're riding a motorcycle and you take a corner way too fast, your instinct is to stare at the wall you're terrified of hitting.
Because it's the threat.
Exactly. But if you stare at the wall, your hands instinctively follow your eyes, and you steer right into it. You have to force yourself to look at the road, to look at the way out, even while the wall is rushing toward you.
That is a perfect parallel, and it summarizes the entire David and Goliath dynamic. Think about it. The Israelite army stared at Goliath for 40 days. And what happened? The giant consumed their entire reality until they were paralyzed.
They steered right into the wall. Exactly. David arrived, looked at Goliath, yes, but he focused his attention on the backing of God. And his courage consumed his reality until he was propelled forward. The text synthesizes all these principles into a singular truth. Courage is a spiritual and psychological discipline, not a natural reflex.
Meaning the battles you face are actually the proving grounds that reveal your true identity.
And ultimate victory belongs simply to those who stay standing, who maintain their focus on the right target.
Who stay standing. Wow. It circles all the way back to that opening definition we started with. Courage is the decision to stand when fear is present.
Full circle.
And bringing this out of the ancient text and into your life today, you listening to this, you might not be facing a literal 9-foot warrior armed with a spear,
Mm.
but the giants are just as real.
Oh, absolutely.
Crippling financial pressures, a terrifying health diagnosis, emotional battles and hidden struggles that no one else in your life sees, an entirely uncertain future. These are the modern giants.
And they utilize the exact same warfare tactics as Goliath. They try to intimidate you, they try to distort your thinking, and they try to paralyze you into total inaction.
But what this biblical framework offers is a completely different lens through which to view those modern giants. It argues fundamentally that you are not outnumbered and you are not outmatched if you truly understand who is backing you.
Right.
It demands that we stop using the world's metrics to calculate our odds of survival. Courage isn't about finding a safe harbor and waiting for the storm to blow over. Courage is walking directly into the storm, armed with a sound mind, a clear identity, and a kinetic willingness to move.
That brings up a really fascinating friction point, though, to leave our listeners with, especially when we consider modern psychology and that crucial rule from the text we just talked about: what you look at grows.
Where are you going with this?
Well, we live in an era that is deeply shaped by therapy culture, right? We are constantly encouraged to analyze our anxieties, to map out the origins of our traumas, and to deeply, obsessively study our fears so we can process them.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost a badge of honor now to hyperfixate on the things that scare us. We want to understand every single facet of our anxiety so we can manage it.
But I want to challenge that modern approach, using the logic of this ancient text.
Okay.
If focusing on the giant makes the giant bigger, and focusing on your backer makes your courage bigger, does obsessively studying and overanalyzing our own fears actually give them more power over our lives?
Wait, are we violating the rule?
Exactly. Does staring constantly at the fear just make the fear grow? It's a highly provocative thought. Are we inadvertently feeding the very things we are trying to defeat simply by staring at them too long instead of shifting our focus to the truth of our identity?
Wow. That is an incredibly challenging thought to leave on. A real question to ask ourselves the next time we find ourselves paralyzed, staring down our own modern Goliaths, just hoping the fear will eventually fade so we can finally take a step.
It really makes you rethink things.
It does. Because remember the promise of this framework. Courage guarantees your presence in the battle, not a life without them. You don't have to feel brave to be brave. You just have to stand.